Welcome to Starbound, where every star tells a story. Ever pondered if recklessness or bravery drives the human spirit? Let's dive into a tale of alien fascination with Earth's most unpredictable inhabitants. Let's get into the story. The transit hub on the far rim of the Tharsis cluster hummed with the constant drone of 1,000 alien conversations. Beings of every shape and color swarmed through the terminal, their voices blending in a symphony of clicks, trills, and guttural rumbles. For Zith, a veteran surveyor of the Triskelion Star Collective, the transit hub was a familiar, if always chaotic, waypoint in his journeys to the uncharted edges of the galaxy. Today, however, his mission was simple. Find a quiet corner and enjoy a ration of fermented Krelip juice before boarding the long-haul transport to his home quadrant. He snagged a booth tucked away from the main thoroughfare and was just beginning to savor the pungent fumes of his drink when a shrill voice broke through his reverie.
Zith! Is that you, you old thorax?
A lanky, insectoid creature scuttled up to his booth, its four primary legs clicking nervously on the polished metal floor. Zith recognized the being as Crix, a notoriously excitable Varaxian trader.
Crix,
he rumbled, giving a slight nod of acknowledgement.
It has been some cycles.
Indeed it has! Oh, now tell me,
the Varaxian lowered its thorax, its multiple eyes glittering in anticipation.
Have you heard the rumors about Earth?
Zith blinked his primary eye cluster and rotated his eye stalks to get a better fix on Crix. He traveled far and wide, charting desolate star systems and documenting curious life forms, but tales of Earth were uncommon, even in this bustling hub.
Earth? Oh, you mean that unremarkable blue-green orb in a backwater system. What about it?
Unremarkable? My dear Zith, that's where the true wonder lies.
Crix leaned in conspiratorially, nearly knocking over Zith's carefully balanced Krelip juice.
The inhabitants, they call themselves humans, are the craziest lot in the known galaxy. Or the bravest, depending on how you look at it.
The Triskelion was intrigued. Humans were bipedal mammals, that much he knew from old star charts. Primitive, fairly unremarkable. So what could be so captivating about them?
Go on,
he said, a hint of curiosity in his rumbling voice. Crix's eyes practically glowed as it perched on the edge of the booth.
Well, it chirped, where do I even begin? They hurl themselves at a perfectly good spacecraft to fall back toward their planet intentionally, and sometimes with only flimsy fabric to slow their descent. Can you imagine?
Zith processed this information. That did seem unwise.
Oh, perhaps a malfunction in their navigation systems, he suggested.
Crix waved its upper limbs dismissively.
Apparently, it's called skydiving, and they do it for recreation. And that's just the start. They climb impossibly tall mountains of frozen water, swim across vast stretches of open ocean, even stand in the path of raging plasma storms, all for the sheer thrill of it.
The Triskelion was, frankly, a bit perplexed. This went far beyond inefficient resource procurement or standard territorial disputes. It sounded downright self-destructive.
What possible survival advantage could there be in such behavior?
He wondered aloud.
That's the great debate, Crix exclaimed. Are they incredibly brave, pushing the boundaries of existence as all truly sentient beings should? Or have they simply lost their collective minds? Imagine the scientific advancements they might have made if they didn't devote so much energy to nearly killing themselves.
The conversation lingered in Zith's mind long after Crix scurried off to spread its curious tales throughout the transit hub. Humans. An enigma, a contradiction wrapped in a fleshy bipedal form. The more he considered their rumored antics, the more his surveyor's mind itched with both skepticism and undeniable fascination.
Well, now that doesn't sound so bad.
A deep voice rumbled from the booth across the aisle, startling Zith. A bulky reptilian being, a Gorath if Zith recalled correctly, raised a mug filled with a foamy, noxious-looking liquid in a gesture of camaraderie.
A bit of risk adds spice to life, don't you think?
The Triskelion was a solitary creature by nature, but something about the story had piqued a sense of fellowship in him. He gestured towards the empty seat opposite him.
Oh, perhaps you'd care to join me, friend Gorath. I confess this tales of Earth have captured my curiosity.
The Gorath settled its considerable bulk into the seat and took a hearty gulp of its beverage.
The name's Track, and curiosity is a healthy trait for any explorer worth their scales,
it said, wiping a bit of foam from its wide snout.
I've had my own brushes with these humans a time or two. Big ones, most of them. Loud, too. Their construction crews were clearing space for a new trade route out in the Elara sector, tearing through an asteroid field like it was butter. Stubborn as mules, those humans. They didn't like being diverted one bit.
Zith tilted his eye stalks.
Oh, well, that sounds more like aggression than calculated risk.
Calculated?
Track snorted.
Not from what I saw. Half the time they were blasting rocks with one hand and fixing their leaky equipment with the other. Frankly, it's a miracle they haven't blown themselves into stardust yet. But damned if they didn't clear that route in record time.
Zith absorbed this new perspective. The humans seemed less like a cohesive species and more like a whirlwind of contradictions. On the one hand, their methods seemed recklessly haphazard, but this same audacity apparently yielded results.
Perhaps,
he mused, tracing a pattern in the condensation on his Krelip container.
Their success lies in not careful planning, but rather in adaptability in the face of unexpected problems.
Track let out a rumbling chuckle that shook the table.
Adaptability. More like stubborn refusal to admit failure. But you might have a point, Triskelion. You might have a point.
He paused, thoughtfully swirling the last of his drink.
Come to think of it, I saw one of those humans do something truly peculiar.
Oh?
Zith leaned forward.
Do tell.
Well, there was this malfunction with one of the plasma drills. A nasty feedback loop threatening to fry the whole operation. Everyone else had cleared out, but this one human, skinny fellow, not much to him. He crawls right into the heart of the machine, wires sparking all around him, and starts fiddling about. I tell you, I was about to start engraving his memorial plaque right then and there.
The Triskelion was fully engrossed by now.
And what happened?
Damned if he didn't fix the thing.
Track smacked his claw hand down on the table, making the silverware jump.
Right under our noses with sweat pouring off of him and his hand shaking so fierce I thought he'd rattle apart. Machine purred like a kitten once he was done, I tell you. If it weren't for their insane love of danger, the humans would be an unstoppable force in this galaxy.
Zith's communicator buzzed, signaling the imminent departure of his transport. He sighed. Duty called, and yet this conversation had sparked something within him, a scientific itch that transcended mere surveyor's protocols.
Oh, it seems my transport is departing, he told Track regretfully. But this has been enlightening.
The Gorath nodded understandingly.
Go chart your stars, Triskelion. But don't forget about that crazy little planet they call Earth. There's more to be discovered there than meets the eye.
Zith had always been a creature of logic, a surveyor driven by data and empirical observations. But stories, it seemed, could paint a richer image of reality than any star chart could. Perhaps instead of merely recording planetary data for the Triskelion archives, he could become a chronicler of the inexplicable. The idea was intoxicating. He found himself while on the long-haul transport to his home quadrant absent-mindedly drafting a project proposal. It outlined something far more ambitious than his usual work, an ethnographic research mission focused on observing and documenting the curious species called humans. The proposal bordered on the outlandish. There had never been a Triskelion expedition motivated solely by the desire to unravel the mysteries of a seemingly chaotic species. He added another section to the proposal, a request for a multi-species research team. If he was going to understand humans, he would need collaborators from diverse backgrounds with different observational methods. A bold plan, and surely one that would be met with skepticism by the Star Collective's governing council. But there, nestled within Zith's carefully calculated words, was a newfound sense of daring, something he never thought he would derive from the tales of those curious, reckless beings from a little blue-green world called Earth. Zith's proposal raised a few spiky eyebrows and prompted more than one concerned hiss from the Triskelion Governing Council. But after a careful review and a bit of judicious lobbying, the Star Collective grudgingly granted him a small research vessel and clearance codes for a 2-cycle expedition. He was even permitted to recruit his team as outlined. The selection process was fascinating, revealing more about various species' perceptions of humans than any official report ever could. The Varaxian contingent, ever obsessed with commerce, argued that understanding human motivations was crucial for maximizing trade profits. A delegation of notoriously cautious herbivores from the planet of Solara 5 saw the mission as a way to study reckless behavior, hoping to develop countermeasures to prevent any human-like tendencies from emerging in their own society. However, it was a lone scientist from the reclusive aquatic world of Thalassa who truly resonated with Zith's vision. Dr. Sill, a bioanthropologist specializing in complex behavioral patterns, spoke not of trade treaties or preventative measures, but of a fundamental curiosity about the nature of sentience itself.
The humans, she chirped through her translation module, her voice a series of gentle clicks and whistles, may represent a unique form of adaptive intelligence. Their actions seem contradictory to our survival instincts, and yet they thrive. This suggests an evolutionary path we don't fully grasp, a potential that exists within the blueprint of intelligent life.
The Triskelion was struck by her words. It was more than mere scientific curiosity, it was a desire to expand the very definition of what it meant to be a sentient being. Together they assembled a small but diverse team that left the safe confines of the Tharsis cluster and set a course for the near-remote star system designated as Sol. The research vessel, christened the Intrepid, was tiny compared to the vast Triskelion survey ships, but surprisingly comfortable. The crew was a mixture of buzzing Varaxian engineers, meticulous Solari biochemists, Dr. Still with her specialized aquatic life support system, and the ever-stoic Gorath Track as their pilot quickly settled into a routine as they crossed the interstellar expanse. Zith, perched in his observation pod, found himself both energized and apprehensive as the blue-green sphere of Earth grew larger in their view screen. He pored over every scrap of remotely reliable information on humans, their biology, their primitive communication networks, the recorded history that seemed to be one long, continuous reel of war, invention, and baffling artistic expression. Yet he felt woefully unprepared for the reality that was to come.
Don't worry, Triskelion,
Track boomed, his wide grin revealing rows of very sharp teeth.
If those crazy humans can't get used to their own existence, I'm sure you'll manage just fine.
Upon establishing a stable orbit, they were immediately overwhelmed by the sheer amount of activity buzzing around the planet. Human communication systems were a chaotic orchestra of electromagnetic chatter, ranging from crude entertainment broadcasts and archaic distress signals to encrypted transmissions that defied the most sophisticated Varaxian decoding attempts.
Where do we even begin?
Zith asked, feeling a strange mix of excitement and apprehension. Dr. Sill, her tank softly illuminated by bioluminescence, trilled an inquisitive sound.
Perhaps we shouldn't overthink this. Let them reveal themselves to us.
They spent their first few days simply observing, identifying patterns in human movement, clusters of activity, and the strange patchwork of energy grids that crisscrossed the planet's continents. However, passive observation quickly became frustrating. Humans appeared to be frustratingly unpredictable, their behavior erratic and seemingly devoid of any overarching logic.
One moment they're clustered together in massive urban structures,
a Salari researcher lamented, tracing the pulsating veins of light on her datapad.
and the next they scatter in tiny individual vessels with no discernible pattern.
It's infuriating.
A Varaxian snapped, its antennae twitching in agitation.
Their communication signals are equally nonsensical. One channel is full of mindless, sentimental drivel, and the next it's flooded with offers to buy obsolete ship parts. Are they species of traders or emotional poets?
The breakthrough, when it came, was almost laughably mundane. One of the Varaxian engineers, in a fit of frustration with the ship's malfunctioning food replicator, had started broadcasting a repair request on an open human frequency. The goal was simple: to see if some resourceful human technician with the right spare parts might be listening. The responses they received were not what they expected. Instead of technical schematics, the channel exploded with a cacophony of voices. Some were curious, bombarding them with questions about their ship, their species, their intention. Others were less friendly, warning them off in colorful, decidedly non-diplomatic language. A surprising number of respondents offered helpful repair tips that ranged from nonsensical to actively dangerous. And still others, well, they seemed mostly interested in bartering for odd items like used Triskelion exoskeleton plates or a slightly damp Silari translation dictionary. It was, without a doubt, pure chaos. And utterly fascinating.
They're communal, highly social.
Dr. Sill's chirps through the translation module were laced with excitement.
And their responses are incredibly varied. This suggests a complex social hierarchy, perhaps even diverse subspecies.
The Triskelion was struck by her deduction.
Diverse subspecies within a single sentient species. Oh, that's quite rare,
he mused, the chaos of the open channel providing a startling revelation. It wasn't the grand actions of the humans that offered the most insight into their culture. It was the mundane, the everyday communications that painted a vivid picture of their contradictions, passions, and utterly perplexing priorities. With renewed enthusiasm, the team dedicated themselves to monitoring various human communication channels. They eavesdropped on arguments about sports teams whose rules defied any comprehensible logic, late-night philosophical debates that spiraled into absurdity, and distressingly passionate discussions about something called pineapple on pizza.
This,
a Silari researcher exclaimed, his voice echoing with a hint of desperation,
is absolute madness. Their social discourse lacks any semblance of structured scientific debate. It's as if they revel in circular arguments and intentionally inflammatory statements.
Inflammatory? Oh, you haven't seen anything yet.
Track chuckled, his booming voice resonating throughout the ship's corridors. He steered them to monitor what the humans termed social media feeds, a baffling digital tapestry of self-propagating images, boastful proclamations, and what appeared to be meticulously staged scenes of domestic life. The Varaxian contingent became obsessed with something called memes. Cryptic images paired with nonsensical phrases that somehow achieved explosive distribution across the human communication network. Varaxian linguists and behavioral analysts spent countless hours trying to decode the humor, only to find themselves more confused than ever. Through it all, Zith and Dr. Sill observed their understanding of humans slowly beginning to coalesce. Unlike many other species who followed rigid social protocols and highly structured patterns of behavior, humans seemed to thrive on individuality, self-expression, and yes, at times, a healthy dose of self-promotion. They were fiercely tribal, loyal to their chosen groups, whether those were sports teams, political factions, or fans of a specific type of music that made the Silari scientists want to seal their auditory receptors.
They seem...
Dr. Sill paused, searching for the right word in the universal translator.
Competitive. At every level of interaction, even within their own kind. But it's just not competition for survival. It's the act itself. the challenge that drives them.
This internal competition sparked ceaseless innovation. On one thread, humans bragged about the jury-rigged household inventions, while on another there was a fierce debate about the merits of various theoretical faster-than-light travel methods. It was maddening, fascinating, and undeniable evidence of a species driven by an insatiable thirst to do, to create, and to surpass not only their limitations but each other's as well. Despite the myriad insights gained, Zith couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. The focus on the mundane, the seemingly random outbursts of creativity amidst the vast tapestry of human life, well, it was starting to feel insufficient. Where were the grand narratives, the overarching principles that guided this baffling species?
We're missing something,
He confessed to Dr. Sill one cycle as they shared a synthetic nutrient paste that vaguely resembled Triskelion moss fungus.
Our observations, they're surface level. We see what they choose to show us, not who they truly are.
The Thalassian scientist trilled in agreement.
It's like observing a school of phosphorescent fish from above the waves. We see the flashes of light, the patterns they create, but we don't truly understand what drives their movement or how they interact beneath the surface.
That sparked an idea in Zith.
Dr. Sill, your people are uniquely equipped to survive directly on Earth's surface, correct?
Realization dawned in her multifaceted eyes.
We could establish a concealed observation post, blend in, live amongst the humans.
The idea was simultaneously radical and so simple it bordered on genius. The preparations were meticulous. Dr. Sill would need a specialized environmental suit, allowing her to move among the humans while subtly monitoring their biochemical data. The Varaxian tinkered away, providing her a suit with real-time translation capabilities and a communication uplink disguised as a common human object. They finally settled on an absurdly bright piece of wristwear. Choosing the location proved tricky. They wanted proximity to a dense human population, but not so central that their observations would be skewed by the atypical behavior found in major hubs. After days of deliberation, aided by crudely translated local entertainment broadcasts, they settled on a mid-sized coastal town that seemed both vibrant and unremarkable, the perfect place to observe human behavior in its most natural state. The transition from the sterile environment of the Intrepid to the bustling human town was jarring for Dr. Sill. The air thrummed with noise, a chaotic mix of mechanical hums, shouted conversations, and primitive rhythmic music blasting from within crude wheeled vehicles. Humans practically swarmed over every available surface, their movements unpredictable and their density baffling to a species accustomed to carefully controlled population centers. And the smells. The Thalassian olfactory receptors were assaulted by a bewildering mix of pungent foods, synthetic perfumes, and the tang of the vast saltwater body humans called an ocean. Yet there was a vibrancy to all of it that was strangely alluring. As Dr. Sill moved through the crowds concealed within her environmental suit, she felt something akin to the thrill of exploring a newly discovered ocean floor. Her suit meticulously relayed data back to the ship, heart rates, hormone levels, the minute changes in facial expressions that seemed to betray complex emotional states. Initially, the results were more confusing than clarifying. Humans in close proximity triggered a cascade of contradictory physiological responses. Elevated heart rates and stress hormones suggesting fear or aggression, coupled with chemical markers indicating pleasure and even euphoria. She witnessed random acts of kindness seemingly offered without expectation of reward, followed by intense bursts of anger triggered by the most trivial of events.
They are both cooperative and antagonistic, often within moments of each other.
She reported back to the Intrepid, her chirps laced with both amazement and exasperation.
It's utterly confounding. Their emotional spectrum is vast and seemingly unpredictable.
Zith, observing the data stream and listening to her reports, began focusing on patterns rather than individual behaviors. It was within those patterns that a strange sense of order began to emerge. Humans, it seemed, thrived within structures based on mutual reliance. Their families, their communities, all functioned with an intricate and, at times, baffling network of social give and take. Humans would fiercely defend members of their in-group, even at a great personal cost, only to turn around and viciously compete against a designated out-group over something as trivial as which sports team threw a ball more effectively. One day, an incident threw both Dr. Sill's observations and the carefully calibrated emotional scales of the small town into turmoil. A fire broke out in an old, densely occupied dwelling. To the astonishment of both Dr. Sill and the team on the Intrepid, humans she had simply observed going about their daily routines suddenly rushed into the burning building with reckless abandon. They passed terrified children out of smoke-filled windows, formed makeshift chains to carry out the unconscious, and some even disappeared into the flames only to reemerge later coughing and soot-streaked, with limp bodies in their arms. By all metrics of self-preservation, it was illogical, insane even, yet it continued until the last possible victim was retrieved. The aftermath was a bizarre mix of grim relief and celebration. Those who had risked their lives were hoisted onto the shoulders of the crowd and cheered, while medics, another baffling human specialization, worked tirelessly to revive those overcome by smoke. The fire had caused terrible damage, but remarkably, there was not a single fatality. Dr. Sill, her biomonitor alight with readings reflecting a complex mix of shock, awe, and a strange prickly sensation that she couldn't quite define, relayed the entire event to the Intrepid.
They are capable of extraordinary self-sacrifice,
she reported, her chirps filled with a new note of wonder.
For their families, their communities, even complete strangers. But this same species argues incessantly over which flavor of frozen confection is superior.
Zith processed this. Humans seemed both selfish and selfless, driven and utterly apathetic, ruthlessly logical and stubbornly emotional. Yet it was becoming clear that these weren't simple contradictions, but rather the facets of a far more complex spectrum of behavior the most sentient species exhibited. Was this the key, then? The pattern he'd been struggling to discern? Did human potential lie not in one defining trait, but rather in their extraordinary ability to embody the entire spectrum between extremes? To act with both brilliant cunning and foolish compassion? Perhaps that was the true nature of their bravery. Not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it, in service of something they valued more than their own individual survival. The Intrepid's 2-cycle mission stretched into 3, and then 4.